I've recently had some people reach out and ask me exactly what I'm doing and found interest in my cross lightning frost shock crit build. So I started this build at level 69 and it was doing some really cool things, and that's what led me to focus on a little bit more. As you see now, I have a lot of runes that are helping a lot at this point, and I've done a lot of leveling to get it there. For the past about 3 weeks, we've been working on cross lighting itself, and now I have it, 3 candors. We finally got mana storm, but as I was running it to begin with, I was running it's really interesting how this skill works. This skill requires that you have something that puts shock on the enemy in order to get the biggest buff out of it. The skill itself doesn't actually shock. So if you can shock enemies, you'll get a big boost of damage against those enemies. So that's why we run electric area with this, okay? So the skill itself, what makes this skill so great, in my opinion, is it has a very high critical rate, meaning it makes it really easy to use things like find weakness, a few skill points throughout your Zodiac, and if you're clever enough to actually use the mastery page, you can go through the mastery page if you need it, and you can boost your crit rate through this cut artery. Cut artery gives you about 3.5 per stack. So if you boost that up, you can actually really boost your actual critical hit, but you're going to have to lay some big points into your critical damage as well. Because it's one thing to crit a lot. If you're not getting critical damage, you're really not dealing a lot of damage as even yet. So one of the easiest ways to kind of keep an idea of where you're at when it comes to your crit is my base crit right now is only 31. It's a very low number. But because of the way that cross lightning actually operates, it actually gives that 130% crit rate bonus directly onto it, meaning it boosts that crit rate another chunk. So we're getting 130 some percent chance right off of the base skill. Now, the skill link rune called Find Weakness is another big one. Find Weakness is helping boost that by another 155%, and it's giving me a base 6 critical rate. So all that goes into making this skill crit very easily, and that's one of the reasons why at a very low level, if you've put all your energy into cross lightning arrow, you can actually get very high crits at a low level. Now, one of the other pieces that you kind of want to lean into is if you're not using electric area to put shock on enemy, you're not going to be dealing a bunch of damage. Now, we've thought about savagery to see if we could actually increase crit damage, but it takes away from a lot of other things. So you have to play ball with that a little bit different. Frost shock itself, the reason why frost shock is working very well is its range. It doesn't do like the little lightning chain does. Lightning chain required you be really close to your enemy in order for it to proc, to put the shock on the enemy, so you'd actually be able to get this to proc and deal the bonus damage. Well, we're not going to get our shock off of this. This isn't going to shock enemies. That's why this skill is very important. But what this does is it creates a bit of crowd control. And one of the biggest buffs that this has is it has that freeze chance and chill rate, meaning you can get damage multipliers off of chilled or frozen enemies as well. And you get a little crowd control if you freeze the enemies, so it'll continuously boost. Now, this spell activation on hit, another important piece. Until I started this build, I didn't realize that main element will increase, and you'll get 100% of the attack damage increase and critical rate off of this skill. So if this skill has high rates and things going into it, this skill is going to grab that too, meaning you can get high crits off of both skills connected directly to it. So again, that's in my opinion why this build operates so well. Of course, you run Vital Strike because this, again, just going to make sure that you crit. It's going to double that crit rate. At some point, if this skill becomes legendary, we may not need that as much, or we can start saying, hey, these pieces of gear that we have on where we're so focused on getting attack critical rate aren't going to be as important. But this is a really heavily focused elemental build. So the Zodiac shows a lot of just damage upon attack, a lot of focus on element damage, as you can see, and then it rolls into just element damage, damage on attack, a little bit of elemental resist. But what I found one of the biggest impacts was actually moving to the Brilliance Zodiac skill tree when I got this unlocked. We went acceleration and convert mana. This build is great, but if you lack the convert mana, it's not going to help you very much at all. You'll be running out of mana. Yes, you'll deal damage, but you will be running out of mana very, very fast. So it's very important that you utilize that. The overpower effect just gives you a little more element boost and penetration, which helps deal more damage. Now, again, element damage and area of effect. The skills themselves, so as we go back here, this is a weird skill because it'll hit, but once it crits, it has a 60% chance to create an area of effect explosion as well, meaning it still yet gets the buff of any area of effect bonuses that you have. Again, Frost Shock is an area of effect skill, so when it hits, it creates area of effect. That's why you kind of want to look at that whenever you look at your brilliance tree and you see that area amplification. It's going to boost any of that damage when it becomes area damage. Sharpness, again, just focusing on grabbing critical hit chance. The really interesting part is the pirate can actually give you a little more element damage and boost damage on certain things, but you sacrifice what I would call like clear speed by doing this. So when we decided, we went with waterfall. And we went with waterfall because every bit of intelligence that I have is going to give me a little bit more element amplification. We have a little barrier absorb, which honestly, I don't need that. I can remove that. That doesn't even really apply to this point. What I could apply it to in any other case is maybe the spell critical rate, which would impact Frost Shock's critical rate, making it a bit higher. Not that important, but the build that I'm focusing on, we don't really want any barrier at all. We have it because the items that we have, we've got, I think, where is it? It's one item that's giving me barrier. Ah, yes, my gloves. But it's really hard to skip out on these gloves because of the critical rate upon area damage bonus, lightning penetration, and just element damage. Those gloves are really good for what I'm looking for. It's a multitude of things. The projectile damage comes in handy, but it doesn't impact it as much as the area of effect or the element damage that you can get. But we're focusing really heavy on dodge. And another reason why we're trying to do that is because it's hard to have crit rate, crit damage, and actually being able to get all your stats while not focusing on dodge. So it's easier to try to focus directly on dodge, forget barrier, forget armor. The more dodge you have, the higher chance you have of dodging, attacks. If I could get the perfect dodge up, that would be very helpful as well. But, it's all a work in progress, as we're only level 87, almost 88 on this particular character. Going back to the Zodiac, the projectile damage and additional projectile count really helps again. Helps clear speed and doesn't hurt too bad against enemies as well. It's just not a single focused. You can clear out. And we have the area damage amplification and the larger area of effect, which again, those two skills do utilize area of effects, so it helps quite a bit. So we could look at the other spots of the skill tree, of course. We've got the, when two-handed weapon, critical rate, critical damage, critical rate, as much as you possibly can without sacrificing any of the damage that you may get as well. So we've got a little damage, a little health. As we know in this game, health is super duper important. So whenever you can grab health or damage for survivability helps. Now, the scent tree, you get a lot of critical rate under the scent tree. And then 40% damage on critical hit kind of helps boost, because you're going to be critting pretty high. Even at low levels, your crit chance on that skill is very high. I mean, this is just the basics of it. This isn't like the deep dive, but this is what's working. But more than anything, the most important piece is your weapon of choice has to have a decent roll of crit rate to boost all the stats. Because if this number stays at like 10, and you have all those other numbers, you're not really going to see a big boost in your critical hit rate. But this is already giving me a flat, which helps all the other things in the skill tree and the skill rune boost that number. That means we crit way more often. Just a quick little idea of what we're going to do here. I'm going to hit the dungeon real quick, and we'll just run like a little dungeon so I can show you as is what crit rate is as we are at level 87, close to level 88. Our tower just got to level 18 as well, but just an idea. See that? That's the basic crit rate. Now, if we drop lightning area, we get a little more crit damage. It was a higher crit damage, so shock is very important. Now, I do recommend as well on this is if you have the ability to grab out your Avatar of Leo, that's the one I recommend putting your work into, because it does deal a lot of damage. It helps with clear. Now, there are some that will actually give you like shock on chance and things like that, which again will help. But dropping your skill here, your enemies get hit by it, your crits go up simply because they have shock on them. And like I say, the skill itself doesn't innately offer you any shock damage at all. So it's very helpful. Again, shock this area is pretty decent as well. It has a very good chance of inflicting shock, and it hits every 0.5 seconds. So it lasts for about 5.5 seconds, and it hits for every 0.5. So at 0.5, a 50% shock chance, you're almost guaranteed that shock is going to hit, so that now when you hit with this skill, it's going to deal that additional 50%. So that's really how the build operates. You can do this at a low level. You do need your runes to be quite nice. You do want to sink some points into the actual attack speed for DPS, the crit chance, and then get your electric area looking good. Runes themselves may help, the rune stones, but these are the basics of it. And I'm a huge fan of concentrated area damage. Smaller area damage implication. I really don't need the enemies to freeze too much. I just need the damage to be higher of the skill, because to me, if I can get this critting very consistently with high numbers and this critting very consistently with high numbers, together they help me deal explosive clear damage and decent boss damage. One of the biggest fallbacks of this build currently is that I kind of lack a lot of that, you know, defense stuff. We got a few things good, but we have a lot of work to do. I hope this is helpful. I hope this kind of gives you guys an idea of what the build is and what it can do. If you guys have questions, please just, you know, drop them, and I'll try to answer them in any way I can. There's a lot of improvement needed to be made to the build itself, but one of the biggest things is look for your crit chance on your bow. You can probably find some rings that are nice. Try to roll crit on those rings. Critical damage is almost more important than critical chance. Like I say, if you're critting every couple of seconds, that's great, but if you're not critting for high numbers, it looks great. You've got a lot of gold numbers pumping, but you're not actually pushing forward and dealing any damage. So it'll be very important that you rock that out. Appreciate you guys watching the video. Any questions, anything like that, make sure you drop it. Mad love, hit that subscribe, like, all that cool stuff. Thank you.